Yes, I think we've given everybody enough time now. Just some little bit of housekeeping. Telephone or computer speakers. So if you're having trouble hearing on your computer, if you go to the right-hand side on your menu, under the audio, you can select either telephone or microphone and speakers. So if you select telephone, it will give you some instructions to call in, which is pretty clear. How do you mute yourself? So if you've got some background noise, it's best off to mute yourself. So it's the second your menu, it's the second little button down. If you just hover over the top of it, it'll say people can hear you, click to mute yourself, and you just click that button. But I'll see most of you have already done that now. We're not going to share webcams. Country internet can't handle it. The chat function. So the chat function, if you go right down to the bottom of the menu, you have a little box called chat with a little positive button on it. If you click on that, it'll open it up. And you see there's already a couple of messages in there. I just type one in there, so hopefully everybody can see that. So, and any of the other boxes, if you want to know what they do, just hover your mouse over the top of them and it comes up with a little description of what it is. And if you have any issues, you can call the office, which are the numbers on the bottom of the screen there. The webinars will all be recorded and hopefully they'll be up within the next week at our website, which is sheepsback.com.au. And again, if you have any problems, call the office and ask for me or Mark Allington, and I'll be able to help you through. So our topic today is how are we going to get more lambs onto the ground this coming season. Now, speaker is Mandy Curnow. She's very qualified to speak on this, as she was involved with the inception of Lifetime Ewe Management. So without further ado, I'd like to change over to Mandy as a presenter, and she'll take you through.
Right, hi everyone. Thanks heaps for coming along. I recognise some of the names and some new names, so it's great to be able to talk to you today from the messiness of my office rather than from travelling to out to somewhere. So everyone hopefully can see me and see the green screen there now, getting more lambs on the ground. If you're having trouble seeing that, just put down in that little chat box. But if you can see it, that's great. Getting more lambs on the ground. Well, I suppose I could really start with a Barnaby-like quote where I say, I'll stake my house on the fact that this is the year you want to have lots of lambs to sell. I'm happy to do that, but I think a lot of people will be realise that there's going to be some good strong prices throughout the year, and there's some opportunities for turning off lambs without much extra cost, and that's as much what I'm really going to talk about today. A lot of you have already set your potential for this year. You've got rams in, or even some of you have got rams out already, so potential's been set. Let's see what we can do. But before I go on, I just wanted to start with talking about the two important bits, and some of the definitions around that, because it might be useful to get that straight in our mind. So just to start with, fertility, when we use the word fertility or conception, it's about the number of ewes pregnant. So it might be 90% of ewes are pregnant, 10% are not. Fecundity is something a bit different in that that's the number of fetuses per ewe. So she can be 0, or she can be 1 or 2 or sometimes 3. She might be carrying twins, she's 2, and so on. When we talk about reproductive rate, we're really talking about the combination of those two. So it's the ewes that are pregnant with how many fetuses. So we often talk about it as a percentage point of view, like 120% reproductive rate means there are 120 fetuses per 100 ewes, i.e. some have got twins, some have got singles, and probably some are dry. And when I talk about lamb survival through the talk, I'm talking about those that are landed on the ground. There's usually very minimal loss between 48 hours from birth and marking, but we tend to talk about lamb survival as being at that time. So it's not about weanerill thrift or losses after marking. It's really right at that point. So let's start by just having a quick overview of joining, though, because it's a pretty important part, and in the past we've concentrated a lot about getting joining right, and we still do. It's still an important part. This is you're setting your potential, and we need to get that right. But as we talk through, you'll see there's some other parts that we also do need to get right. Now this graph here is really explaining that in every mob of ewes there's a range of animals, and this data here is merinos, but it's still very similar for composites and maternals, and different flocks will have a different relationship to condition score. So as you can see down here, we've got ewe condition score at joining, and let's have a look at this black line to start with. This is the proportion in the flock that are dry. As you can see, and I'm sure you already know, that ewes in poor condition are more likely to be dry. As the condition of the flock increases, there's going to be less ewes that are dry. And this red line, which is the number of twinning ewes, is the converse to that. So when ewes are in very poor condition, they're less likely to be cycling and conceive twins. When they're in good condition, they're more likely to have twins. And we see that every time. If there's a good season, we get more twins out there. If it's a poor season, poor joining conditions, we don't get many. And really the proportion of singles in the flock is the reflection or the leftover from what the twinning rate is and what the dry rate is. And that's why proportion of singles goes down as ewe condition score goes up, and that's purely because the amount of twinning ewes goes up, if you understand what I mean. The green line that I just put up there, that's about the 120% reproductive rate level. So there's a proportion of singles, proportion of twins, proportion of dries. And 120% is what we regularly hear from pregnancy scanning contractors as to the sort of an average over a whole range of seasons, whole range of regions, and a whole range of different types of flocks. Now, if you go on to the next one, I just want to quickly talk about lambing here. So this is some background that we'll use later on in the talk. You can see it's the ewe condition score at lambing is on the bottom here, and lamb survival up the side. This black line is about the survival of single lambs, and you can see it's pretty flat. So even when ewes are in poor condition at lambing, the survival doesn't really change that much. They're pretty robust at whatever the condition their mum was at leading up to and at lambing. Twins are a different story. Twins is where it all happened. So as you can see, ewes in poor condition by lambing, if they're having twins, there's all sorts of things happening. The lambs aren't surviving, and often the ewe survival isn't good either. So some key parts in there. Twins are a lot more responsive to how you look after them. Singles are fairly robust in most situations. But remember, all our flocks have a combination of all these. You can't manage your flock so you only get single ewes pregnant. It doesn't work that way. If you reduce the condition score at joining so you don't get as many twins, you're going to get more dries. So it's just one of those things we have to work with. What I want to share with you today is to really look at where some opportunities are. And this first table I've got up here, this is using that 100% reproductive rate, the normal or average reproductive rate out there in the state. And I've just chosen a nominal 100 ewes here. So there's 100 ewes in the flock joined, we're assuming there's about 5% dry. Now that might be a bit low for a lot of flocks, but 5 to 10% is often what we see. Now, so the number of ewes scanned as single, 70 of those 100 will be scanned as single, and that gives you a potential of 70 lambs, 1 for 1 below. 25 ewes be scanned as twins out of the 100, and that gives you a potential of 50 lambs because they're twins. Now I've chosen here, this survival rate is a pretty average survival rate across the state from what we've picked up right across a whole range of flocks and work. 90% single survival and 50% survival in twins. And marked as twins, you're getting 25 lambs of the 50 lambs potential. 20% survival. It gives you 88 marking, and a fairly robust marking rate. Let's get a bit of feedback here. Mark, maybe could you mute a couple of people? I think we've got, there we are, I think that's probably easier. Yeah. So we've got a marking rate of 88%, and a lot of you would probably
I'll just try and get hold of Mandy. Sorry about that, everyone.
Is that better? Sorry, I think I got muted. Okay, so hopefully, not sure how far back we got, but I'll start again at this slide here. This slide here is the, we looked at getting 88% with normal survival and an average reproductive rate. If you really want to push reproductive rate up to 150%, so that's 1.5 fetuses on average per ewe, what would that look like? And if you look at this table that's appeared down the bottom here, we've got the same 105. Now we're looking at 40 ewes scanned as single and with the potential of 40 lambs, 55 ewes scanned as twins, giving 110 lambs. Same survival as before, but what it's done is it's bumped us up to 91%. So for that huge shift in the ewes cycling rate, we're only getting 3% increase in marking rate. And that's because we've pushed more ewes to be pregnant with twins, but we haven't changed the whole survival rate thing here. And we all know what that really looks like in a good season. We've got a paddock of singles and twins all mixed in. We've got our 90% survival singles and 50% survival of twins. Those are the potential ones that disappear, and by marking, that's what you've got left. Although it started out as a great strong year, you've got to average to above average marking rate. So I wanted to just sort of put a little bit of a boundary around that, and I'll use autumn lambing as an example. So loss of half a condition in your hand feeding, you can do all sorts of things. But if you don't know on who's having singles and who's having dries, and given that if you've got a high performance flock, maybe 50% of your ewes are having twins, you're missing out on a whole lot of information. We do precision ag when we do cropping. This is the precision ag part of sheep husbandry. So, and I'm sorry for any pregnancy scanner who just does wet and dry, but what I'm saying is scan for twins. The extra 30 cents or whatever is peanuts in the overall cost of getting them in the yards, doing all that sort of stuff. If you just do wet and dry, all you're getting, particularly if you've only got 10% dries in the flock, you're finding out only things about the 10%. If you're going that little bit extra, you've got a lot more information. And with the dries, you can remove the dries and get them out of the system, run them as wethers, or sell them post-shearing, depending on when you're lambing. But now let's look at increasing lamb survival, because this is where the main game is. So let's just stick with 120% breeded up head rate, the normal rate. But this time, let's lift survival 95% in the singles, 75% in the twins. And these are quite achievable rates. We achieved these over a whole lot of farms, right through from Dandaragan, Mora, through Coaching-up Dark and down to Kendon-up Mount Barker quite easily. So 75% twinning levels here. Let's see what happens. Of the 70 single lambs potential, we're getting 66 on the ground. Of the 50 lambs potentials, twin lambs, we're getting 38 on the ground. That leads to 104%. So if you can remember before, just by lifting joining rates, you're getting 88%. By not lifting joining rates but working on your survival rate, you're getting 104%, a much better return for your effort. But if you want to do both, you get a double whammy, because of course if you lift your conception rate and your number of ewes with twins, and you lift twin survival, things really change and you're up at the 120% level. And of course you've got a higher productive flock, or some maternal genetics in there. There's going to be a high proportion of twins anyway, and perhaps a number of triplets coming into there. But don't forget that if you're going to lift your lambing rates above about your 80 or 90%, it means you're dealing with twins. So the twins become the very important part. So all these twins, are they worth it? What's going to be the payback for having lots more of these lambs on the ground? This is some work done by John Young and a couple of consultants. They got together and crunched the numbers. And this, when I say every extra lamb, that's not extra lambs on the farm from buying more ewes and having more ewes mated. These are the extra lambs that survive through to sale, and it accounts for all of the costs, extra husbandry, feeding the extra pregnant lactating ewes, the cost of twins, because twins do have a lower body weight, they grow less wool, they require more feeding to get to weight before you can ship them off. But this has all been part of this price analysis, and they've done it for a number of different prices. So let's focus on this 5 kilo one. So at $5 a kilo, between $52 and $74. I should explain the merino here. This is a pure merino system, so merino mating to merino, no terminals or anybody else in the system. It's selling surplus ewes and wethers at I think about 12 months or thereabouts. The longer you keep them, the lower the profit. The quicker you turn them over, the higher this number gets. There's some flexibility in that. This merino and terminal here, this is a merino self-replacing flock with surplus merino ewes put to a terminal sire. A lot of you out there, I'm sure, are doing that system. This one is pure maternal, so this is no merino in the system. This is maternal genetics, and you're selling full prime lambs into the system. The interesting thing you might see here is how well the merino and terminal flock does, actually. And a lot of this is about, if you're increasing the number of lambs, it's because you've increased because you've increased the number of lambs, it means you can run less ewes to generate the replacement lambs, and you've got more ewes to generate prime lambs to turn off, and that's why it's so price sensitive in here. But there's some very good rewards for even at $5 a kilo. And if people are thinking, hey, it might go to $6 a kilo by springtime, then there's some serious money to be made. And even at $3 a kilo, there's some good money to be made by just making sure that you improve your lamb survival. And the great thing is, if you're understocked, these values go up because you're utilising more of your feed base and your labour for the labour you've got available. Twins are harder to manage, but you're going to get them anyway. So what do we do to manage them? One of the things I like to recommend, and we often talk about this, is joining only for 2 cycles. And that way you eliminate those lambs born in the who were conceived in the 3rd cycle, so after the 35 days that the rams have been in. And if there are twins in that lot, they're even smaller. They're your problem lambs. They don't actually contribute much to your overall profit. And if you're joining before January, you need to be teasing or take into account the time needed for the rams to act as teasers. Now, if your scanner does it, they can identify early and late drop. This just gives you some more flexibility about taking some of the bigger singles off if they dropped early, taking those ewes, running them separately. You can focus feed on some of the later conceived animals. This one really is the key, because ewe condition score at lambing is affected obviously by their feed, and in the lead up to lambing, it's not just lambing, so they're having to increase or maintain their condition to be at that condition at lambing. So best feed to the twinning ewes. They're the ones that are likely to give you, depending on the survival rate, up to 1.5 lambs for the effort, and they're the most at risk. The other side to that is you can limit the feed to your single ewes, and you can protect them against dystocia. And I know those of you who had a lot of sheep in 2005 and that burster of a season, the impact of dystocia on single ewes that were just growing on so much early feed was huge. People who had pregnancy scanned and were able to separate twins and singles separately for pregnancy were able to control the weight gain in their singles and protect against dystocia. We recommend the twinning ewes need to be kept in above condition score 3. And to be able to do that, whatever time of year you lamb, it means don't let them slip lower than the condition you want them to lamb in. And so what I'm saying is it's hard to put weight on once they've lost it, and it's less efficient to do it as well. So they might start the season at condition score 4. You go, oh, these girls can afford to lose a little bit of weight. They can, but only as far down as you want the condition for them to be in at lambing. So even if it's only 2 months into lambing, you'll need to maintain them if they've reached that condition you want them to lamb in. And there are a couple of other things here that are useful around the lambing time. Allocate the best paddock to twinning ewes. That's in shelter and predator control. Little twins got higher surface area, more exposed to weather, that can kill them. Where possible, ID the twin-born lambs. This might allow you some sensible selection later on. If they've been kept as ewe replacements, you'll know who was born as a twin. Don't delay weaning until the smallest lamb is okay, and get those twinning ewes back up in condition for the next joining, because they're likely to have twins again. And we're getting through the time here. I've got a couple of other things I could talk about, but what I thought I might do is a break for some questions, and also just put up some of those resources screen whilst we talk for some questions. If people wanted to explore a little bit about, culling once dry, twice dry, lamb and moss, that sort of thing, I can talk about that. And I can talk a little bit about maintaining the profile or some feed budgeting around that. Up on the screen at the moment is we've got this on our website. We've got our feed budget calculators, feed cost tools, tips on joining pregnancy, marking and weaning. That's all there. If you search on sheep, it should come up. Otherwise, that's the direct address. These three things here are particularly important. I think joining a Lifetime Ewe Management group, I'm sure a number of you have heard about Lifetime Ewe Management. Some of you may already have done it. Jonathan England at the Narrogin office is the coordinator of that. It's a great way to build up your skills in condition scoring, feed budgeting and managing ewes so that you can lift that lamb survival. The other one here is the Lamb Survival Initiative. This is a pretty exciting initiative that we're starting this year through the grower groups, and it's about getting some one-on-one support to manage your ewes for survival, but also provide some a bit of a subsidy for multiple scanning for multiples as well. Contact your grower group or Catherine Davies at Northam office. And we're hoping to be rolling out some Bred Well, Fed Well seminars, which are really highly acclaimed last time they came through, and the What Killed My Lamb seminars, which are really interesting to see. Well, I can actually go out and do a few quick PMs on my lambs and really find out what's happening there. The other thing is, don't forget we've got Ovine Observer, which is our quarterly newsletter, which has in-depth articles about all sheepy things. You can go to the newsletters and you can register there, or just drop me a line. But Mark, I think I might stop for questions. Not getting any body language through the screen, so I don't know whether people are going, what the hell's she on about, or we know it all.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much for that, Mandy. Yeah, pretty timely. I think you're correct in saying that we should expect that we can probably get good prices for any sheep we sell over the next 12 months. I think there's actually a couple of questions in the chat box. What's the cost of Lifetime Ewe Management to the producer? Okay,
to a producer, the overall cost is $880. That's for the 2-year program, and there's 6 meetings in that. The total cost is more, but AWI are covering 2/3 of that. So the actual cost to the producer is $880, and it's a group of 4 to 5 producers. And we've got some really great experienced deliverers in that are available to help you join a group. You can join a group that's existing, or you can form your own group with people around your area, and that works really well. Now, another question here. What time after first joining can early and late lambs be detected by the scanner? It's really in that window of between sort of 80 and 100 days that the scanner works best. Experienced scanners will rate them early and late depending on the size of the fetus. It's not an exact science, but you can at least get a good proportion of animals identified. These ones are going to drop earlier. I might run them separately because I'm going to draft off the big single lambs and just get them straight to the processor, or you've got those sorts of management. Or you might like to focus feed over lambing, particularly if it's a bad season. I might go, well, look, if I know when they're likely to lambing, I can really focus giving them some extra feed at that time.
How much slower is it to do that? Well, for the scanner?
I don't think it's that much slower for them to recognise it. Probably watching one of the scanners do it, it was more about getting a record of the information, how you mark the ewe or draft it, which way, rather than the actual time. They don't tend to do an actual measurement, but an experienced scanner, and a lot of the New Zealand scanners do this routinely. They'll very quickly get a picture of whether that larger lamb is likely to be in the first in the first group, if you like, the first group dropped.
Yeah, no.
There's another question there from you, Bob. Worst condition this year to last? I think it has varied. I don't see them as being that much different, though a lot of ewes were in very good condition early last year. And the rest of the question is, if so, early feeding would be the go, as late feed goes straight to the lamb and can cause problems. That's right, and it's a bit like the thing with feeding weaners. A little bit earlier is much more efficient than a lot late. And if you can keep that condition score, maintain the condition score, it's the most effective use of feed anyway, and having them at reasonable conditions throughout pregnancy is still contributing to the adequate growth of the lamb and the setup of the ewe for lambing. So yes, most definitely. I mean, if you're a late lammer, late July or August, you'll find that ewes will rapidly increase weight on green feed as it comes through, and that'll pick up thinner ewes, but it can cause some problems later. So don't let them go down past where you want them to be, I think, is the best advice.
Yeah, so has anybody else got any questions?
Did anyone want to talk quickly about the impact of culling on once dry, twice dry?
Yeah, I think we might have a shy audience. I think if we can go through that, I'll be interested to hear.
Okay, I'll go through there, and then if there's further questions, we can go on. So I'll just flip back here. Oop, gone too far. Okay, a lot of people ask questions, and a lot of people do all sorts of things on, and often it's about what's the impact of culling a ewe that's failed to lamb. A second chance, but there's some quite good data around what the impact that actually has, and a lot of people also ask about the impact of, if the ewe's lambed and lost, should I cull her? And I suppose before I go further, I'd like to just I'll talk about that. If the ewe's lambed and lost, should I cull her? The work they've done in a whole range of flocks over the last 30 or 40 years shows that the heritability, i.e. what she'll pass on to her lambs, and the repeatability, i.e. whether she'll do it again, is very low in lambed and lost, and that's due to there's so many different reasons a ewe could have lambed and lost. Could have lost her lamb. The season might have been a bit poorer. She might have been down from the previous year because she raised twins last year, and she still managed to get pregnant again with twins. There might have been some other conditions, bad weather, just general misdemeanour, not misdemeanour, misadventure, I think the word is they use. So it is very hard to particularly colour ewe, if she's lambed and lost, particularly if she's done it just the once, she's more than likely to go again. But if we have a look at this graph I've got up there, this is the result from a whole range of flocks. And on the bottom here, this is the result of the first two joinings, so the maiden joining and the first adult joining. And on this side is the proportion, the rate of the survival rate, or the marking rate, if you like, of all the rest of the joinings, so the year 4, 5, 6 joinings. So this first column, if the ewe was dry for both her maiden joining and her next joining, she is likely to give less than on average, half a lamb for the rest of the joinings that she's kept in the flock. I.e., she's pretty low productive. If she's never got pregnant, and you go, yeah, twice dry, she's out. I can get that. When we start looking at this next one, which is dry once, so she didn't get pregnant once, but she also got pregnant once, but she lost it, then her subsequent reproduction is a lot better than the twice dry. Just the fact that she's got pregnant means that she's got the possibilities of getting pregnant again and keeping it for the next few the next few joinings. This next column is she's weaned successfully, won once, and she's been dry once. So you get a little bit of a jump up from the one who's lost once and dry once to one that's successfully weaned. She has more lambs over the rest of her life. But from then on, you're only getting little increments. So if she's weaned once and lost once, i.e. she's had 2 pregnancies, but been successful once and not the other, and if she's had 2 successful pregnancies and weaned a lamb in each of those pregnancies, there's not a big jump. So it's these twice dry ones which are the ones to get out of your mob. And there's an impact there. They don't contribute much to the genetic potential of the mob because actually they're not having lambs. So they're not passing on their genes. But also removing them from the mob means that you're replacing, with your hope, although they'll be untested maidens probably, a ewe that's more likely to conceive again. And that is the issue with looking at culling on once dry. Say you went to mob and culled everything that had been dry once. In order to keep your ewe numbers up, you're going to have to add more maidens in to replace them with. And those ewes are untested again, and there'll be variability in that. So the tightness of response, if you've got 2 years of data, and a great way of doing that is if through pregnancy scanning she's been dry, put a little tag in her ear or a nick in her ear, whatever, so you can identify her permanently as having failed a non-pregnancy. And you can do the same with whether they've lambed and lost as well, but the key ones are if they haven't had that pregnancy. So you can lift, it's about 2% a year over 10 years is the lift in reproductive rate of your flock. You also eliminate those great big fat girls who come through every year and you're thinking, are they fat because they're doing well but they've not had a lamb, or are they just good doers and they've had a lamb? You need to be able to isolate those ones that just got bigger and bigger and ate more and more, and the more you feed your lambing flock, the bigger those dry ewes get because they've got all this wonderful food on tap. Do many people cull on dry out there? If you want to put a note in the chat, if you cull on once dry. Most people are doing that. I've got another question there. What's the average conception rate and marking rate of maidens? Well, that's a good question because maidens are a little bit different, and you'll see that there are not as many twins in maidens, and so you're looking at often around the 100% or the 90 to 100% average reproductive rate for maidens, particularly if they haven't reached a good weight at joining, and it really does depend on the weight at joining. It seems to be that size or weight at joining is really important. Then to stimulate the twinning, it's almost the condition score on top of them achieving that joining weight that triggers the twinning. So it's almost like I've got the body reserves to have twins because I've got this extra condition, I'll have twins. But maidens generally have a much lower reproductive rate. And if you're preg scanning, you may choose to only do wet and dries in maidens because there's a high proportion of dries and a lower proportion of twins. However, if you've got twinning maidens, they're pretty important ones to hang on to and to identify as well. Marking rates from maidens, In merino flocks for maidens, and if they're well managed, then I tend to have them in smaller paddocks than larger paddocks for maidens. You should be looking at least 90% for merinos, but 100% is very achievable in maiden merinos in small flocks. There's a lot of work happening at the moment, and some of you might have heard Jason Tromp and Mark Ferguson talk about at the lambing rate per day in flocks. So they're saying that with these high performance flocks, you've got and they're all lambing within a month, and you've got 150% potential of lambs to be lambed down. But it's a really busy paddock, and the ewes tend to stay close-ish together. It doesn't matter how big the paddock is. But if there's lots of lambs being born, there are ewes stealing lambs from others. There's all sorts of things happening, and preliminary results have shown that there is a strong relationship between the lambing rate per day, that's how many lambs are dropped on a particular day, and mortality. So lower the lambing rate per day, the lower the mortality. They're trying to do a bigger study across that to really identify how important stocking rate is, paddock size is, and some other factors. And I think Mark's put up a link for the survey there. We've got a couple of results back from people about culling dry ewes. I know a lot of people do a udder check and use that, and that's often a pretty reliable method if you know what you're looking for. In a meat enterprise, a full-on meat enterprise, I could understand people saying, okay, if they don't get pregnant straight away, they're out. The only thing ewes are doing on my property, which is a 100% meat enterprise, is to produce lambs. So they may only get one chance. But you're more likely to be more closely monitoring your ewes and looking after those than in a broad-scale wool flock as well. Any other questions?
There's one there. What's the joining weight? What should we be targeting?
Oh, sorry, I must have gone past that. It does depend on what your sort of the size, the frame size, or the standard reference weight, as we call it, of the ewe is. But generally, we work on about 80% of adult weight is what you should be aiming for. So if you use 60 kilos when they're adults, bare shorn in reasonable condition, then 80% of that. But if they're a smaller frame, then obviously there's a lower weight. A lot of people who are joining Ewe Maidens now, and Beth Paganoni's got some great information on that. Joining Ewe Maidens, they can grow them, grow the ewe lambs to a similar weight with high growth genetics, and then they're able to start cycling similar rates. The New Zealanders are better at that area, but we'll catch up and we'll do it more efficiently, so it's okay. So joining weight 42 kilos is fine for a smaller merino, but I go a bit more if you've got bigger frame ewes, and a lot of people have got some reasonable size ewes these days.
So what would you, as a with the program, twice dry is what you'd be choosing. So if you had designed the ideal program to get more fertile ewes, so you just go twice dry and they're out?
I think it's a combination of things, because there are flocks who are obviously more fecund than others. So be looking at genetics carefully. There are some flocks that respond to nutrition at joining and cycle higher than others, but I'd still be getting rid of twice dry ewes out of the system, most definitely. And if I'm really going to push things and I've added nutrition or even used some of the commercially available products to get twinning ewes, then it's really about making sure you manage them, particularly in late pregnancy. We talked a lot. We used to talk a lot about flushing ewes to get the ovulation rate up, but as I said, the thing about increasing ovulation rate and the potential rate, if you don't do anything about lamb survival, you're not going to be going anywhere fast. But the other thing with flushing, and that's feeding lupins for a time before rams in, is that the ewes that respond most to that are the skinny ones. So you can actually get a condition score 2 ewe more likely to carry twins by giving her lupins over 14 days at joining. Only trouble is, you've got a pregnant ewe with twins at condition score 2. You're going to have to do something more with her over pregnancy to get her to a decent weight for lambing. So it really is about having ewes in the right condition throughout the year. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be in high condition all year, but the right condition at key times.
Yes, I think the message is that Lifetime Ewe course is a good thing to join, and at $880 it's only 5 days a year of your time plus 15 sheep. So yeah, I'd be definitely encouraging everybody who hasn't done one to try and join a group.
That's right. And if you don't feel you're up to joining a group or not quite sure of the benefit, talk to your grower group and join in with the Lamb Survival Initiative and get a bit of a taster of what happens in a Lifetime Ewe Management group and what potential it might bring for you as well.
Yeah, so if we don't have any more questions, there's a survey posted in the chat box, which if everybody could complete would be great. It just ensures our funding for WI. So if you, to be honest, it's all anonymous, so if you didn't like it, say that, but if you thought this is a good idea and you'd like more, then you can answer that. Thank you very much, Mandy. Yeah, it was great. I think, yeah, Lifetime Ewe courses, we've got a bit of background information now, so Lifetime Ewe courses, if people haven't done one, where they should be going. So if anyone else hasn't got any questions, I might shut the session off there.
Thanks, Mark.
No worries, and this webinar will also be up during the week sometime, so if you want to rewatch it or tell someone else about it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.